Welcome back to One Piece Explained. We recently got a brand new teaser trailer giving us a tour of the various sets, props, and costumes that we'll be seeing in the upcoming second season of the One Piece live action series, and it's packed to the brim with Easter eggs and details. Some are put right in our faces, while others are a little harder to find, so you know I had to break it all down. And trust me, there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. If you're new to the channel, I do in-depth breakdowns for all things live action, from news to trailers to episodes, so if you've enjoyed any of my videos, be sure to like and subscribe. As always, when I do these live action breakdowns, I try my best to make them both informative and engaging for new fans and old fans alike. As such, I'll be discussing the various references to arcs beyond the scope of Season 2 without necessarily getting into the major spoilers for the series. That said, let's get right into this breakdown. Our host for this tour is none other than Jeff Ward, the man who brought Buggy the Clown to life in Season 1. He'll of course be returning to reprise his role, as Buggy plays a fairly large role in the Loguetown arc, but I'm interested in seeing if they find a way to keep him around throughout the season, much like they did in Season 1. Behind him is a wall full of posters, reminiscent of the one we saw in Shellstown and Syrup Village back in the previous season, but this one here looks to be at Loguetown. While Syrup Village's notice board featured mostly posters, news, and local ads, this one here is much more similar to the one in Shellstown, as it's just dripping with marine propaganda. Some of these assets seem to be the same from the last season, though we have a few new ones seeking out new recruits, specifically young men between the ages of 18 and 45. Now in the source material, we don't know if there's an age requirement to join the Marines, though Kobe was only 16 when he joined, and it's not completely clear how old he's supposed to be in the live action. There's another poster here parodying a classic format for military recruitment ads that we see in real life, reading 4 questions to men who have not yet enlisted. If you are physically fit and between 18 and 45 years of age, are you really satisfied with what you are doing today? Do you feel happy as you walk along the streets and see other men wearing their Marine uniform? What will you say in years to come when people ask you, where did you serve in the war against pirates? What would happen to the world if every man stayed at home? Your friends and family need you. Enlist today. At the bottom reads absolute justice, which is the general philosophy practiced by and instilled in most Marines that we see across the series. To the right is one of the posters that we saw in Season 1, though here you can clearly make out the World Government logo at the bottom. Of course, there are several wanted posters on this wall as well, with bounties for Buggy the Clown, Monkey D. Luffy, and an obscured poster in the middle that looks to belong to Alvida. Rather fitting, as all 3 of these pirates make an appearance in the Loguetown arc, but Alvida's picture may have been presented in such a way to allude to her quote-unquote redesign that we see upon her reintroduction. Now, at the bottom of all these posters is another graphic featuring a stereotypical pirate with the captain's hat and an eye patch. He looks to be gripping a cloth in his mouth, perhaps being depicted awaiting his execution as part of the anti-pirate propaganda that we see all around. Moving to the costume department, we see racks upon racks of costumes, and most of these look to be for generic Marines and other extras, as you can see stated on these labels. Though some of the Marine outfits look to be associated with names, but upon closer inspection, these would seem to be the names of the actors themselves. We have a few close-ups of some named character outfits, with Buggy's outfitted from Season 1, alongside a striped yellow shirt. When we pan out, we see that it hangs beside Luffy's classic outfit, and get a better look at the bottom half, which looks to be an apron with a wave pattern at the trim. This is the outfit worn by Sappi, the fishmonger Sanji buys the elephant true bluefin from in Loguetown. When you look closer though, there are some interesting stains or markings on the shirt, so I wonder what that's about. Now, across this montage, we briefly see costumes that are blurred out, and a lot of the stuff in this teaser gets this treatment as well, so as to not spoil us, but there are a couple instances where it doesn't always work. Off in the corner here, you can spot a white jacket with a green collar and multiple cigars strapped to the chest and arm. This of course belongs to none other than Smoker. Further down from Sappi's outfit, you can make out a dark jacket, pants, and some boots or shoes. This costume could belong to Tashiki, but at the same time, given these yellow tassels hanging off the pants, it could very well be the costume belonging to Mr. 8. From there, Jeff conveniently walks forward to cover up another costume in the back, but there is a brief moment that you can make it out in full. This, of course, is Robin's iconic outfit from Alabasta with the white cowboy hat and jacket. Now, there's a montage of blurred costumes that follow after, but you can tell that this outfit is the one we stop to see here, as evidenced by the wall that stops here and the orange block below. Now further down to the right, you can spot a furred cloak with a hood that resembles an animal, and sleeves that resemble paws or feet. This is of course the cloak worn by none other than the Tin Tyrant himself, Wapol. In the source material, it's actually kind of suggested that this garment is made from one of the woolly hippos that he killed himself. Now, there is some focus placed on this group of outfits on display here, but given the fact that we're actually getting to see them in full, and they're placed in the area with all of the extras costumes, I figured these would be far less consequential characters as well. With all of the fur, gloves, and layers that we see among them, these are probably from some of the citizens on Drum Island. We then meet up with his showrunner, Matt Owens, who is rocking a t-shirt that looks to feature a message written to him from Oda, entrusting the second season to him. You see an original illustration of all of the original 5 straw hats at the center with Chopper's head peeking out from the text. The jacket he's wearing here looks to have been gifted to him by Zoro's actor, Makenyu, in collaboration with his own clothing brand. Big shout out to Dawn Knight in my Discord for bringing that to my attention. If you're interested, you can come join our little community over on Discord as we break down everything going into Season 2. Link in the description. From there, we briefly check in with hair and makeup as we get this amazing wall full of wigs. We see multiple shots of this area throughout this video, so let's try to figure out as many as we can. Starting from the right, we have a very familiar wig that belongs to Mr. 7. It looks like he'll be returning in this season despite dying against Zoro back in Season 1, but I'd imagine he'll be occupying a flashback scene. Beside his wig is a reddish pink one with 2 short buns or tails. This of course belongs to Miss Monday, and you can see as such on the label. Really glad to see her included in the adaptation, as this gives us more reason to believe we'll see her partner Mr. 8 as well. Next is a wig with long dark purple hair. It's honestly a bit hard to place, but when you look closely, you can sort of make out a W and a P, making me think this might be Wapple. The next one down is also hard to make out. At first I wondered if this was Crocodile, but when you pan out, you can see that the hair is a bit longer, perhaps belonging to Cobra. The one beside that is also incredibly distinct with what looks to be a long dangling beard, but I'm unsure at the moment. If you recognize either of these, be sure to let me know in the comments. Now, the next one over features long gray hair, likely belonging to Dr. Kureha, and the one beside it resembles Miss All Sunday's dark hair with the bangs. Going to the left once more looks to belong to Ippon Matsu, the weapons shop owner from Loguetown, who we'll talk more about in just a bit. To the left of that one is Miss Valentine's, as shown here, and the last one in this row looks like it belongs to Helmeppo. Skipping up to the top now, you'll find long blue hair that is clearly for Miss Wednesday, while the one beside that could be for her partner, Mr. 9, or perhaps another Nami wig. To the left with that very familiar mustache looks to be for Gold Roger, who we learned several weeks ago would be returning in this season. And to the left could be the wig that we'll see with Mr. 5. Now, one of the more interesting wigs in this row is the one on the other side of Vivi. It's a bit hard to make out, but if you look closely, you'll notice it features multiple different colors. This, my friends, could be a character that was initially planned to be in the first season, but eventually written out, Spiel. If you're not aware, the One Piece podcast did a series of interviews with the people who helped bring the live action to life, and one of them was with Amanda Ross McDonald, who was featured in this set tour. In it, she talks about working on a wig that had blue, orange, yellow, purple, pink, and green hair that ended up getting cut.
I think the one that I'm a little bit sad about, and now I have to remember his name, and I think I've erased because he didn't play in it. But you might be able to help me. But he has 6 different colors of hair, and he's almost like a Joker.
The Mr. 7 at the beginning?
Oh no, I think it's Mr. Spiel. So we had a Spiel in there as well, but he didn't play in the end. They cut him out of the script, and he was a lot of fun to make because he had like blue, and then yellow, and then orange, and pink, and green, and purple, and these different spikes sticking out of his head, and that was a lot of fun to make.
There aren't too many characters who fit that description other than Spiel, and I can totally see this belonging to him, albeit before the hair got twisted. For some more context, Spiel is a character originally designed for Romance Dawn version 2. This was one of the one-shot predecessors to what would become One Piece that eventually got adapted as a special episode in the One Piece anime proper. This wouldn't be the first time something like this got adapted into the live action, as back in Season 1, we had the inclusion of Crescent Moon Galley, who was originally from Romance Dawn version 1, and made his way into the series proper in a brief panel at the Baradier later in the series. With them deciding to take their time with Alabasta, I would not be surprised if Spiel made his way into this season, especially since his bounty poster can be seen in the background of the Gold Roger bar in the Loguetown filler episodes. Now moving down to the third row, you can make out some familiar pieces, as this looks to be Kobe's wig, and beside it appears to be Mihawk's facial hair. Understandably, no wig present since we mostly just see him in his hat at this point. The rest of the wigs in this row are a bit harder to make out, and end up looking fairly generic, though the one all the way to the left is very interesting, as it seems to have these yellow lines or circles running throughout. With the rest of these, let me know in the comments who you think they belong to. The final row at the bottom looks to only have one wig that actually looks a lot like Sanji's more recent hairstyle with the hair down on the other side, so I'm interested in seeing who this one could belong to as well. Now there are even more wigs on the other side, but most of these are fairly difficult to make out. The one all the way to the left up top looks like it could be Zoro's green wig, while the one next to it and the one all the way at the end may be different Nami wigs, or perhaps even for Shanks with the one all the way to the right. Now for this last wig, I should drop a spoiler warning. Please skip ahead to the next section if you are not caught up to the Thriller Bark arc and wish to remain unspoiled. Alright, this one wig in the center stands out to me as it's a large afro. To me, this feels like it's probably belonging to Brooke. If you've been keeping up with the news coverage on the channel, you know that we've been talking about the possibility of seeing a live-action Brooke in this season. This all started a few months ago when pre-production photos leaked depicting what looked to be the Rumbar Pirates ship, and we got a better look at it since then through more photos taken by observers and even official promotional videos showcasing it in the back. From this, we know that the flashback that takes place during Twin Cape will likely be extended, giving us the perfect opportunity to see a live-action Brooke while he was alive. On a similar note, one of the blonde wigs below could also belong to the Rumbar Pirates captain, Yorkie. Going back to this frame real quick, though it was initially blurred, you can actually see it in full in a different frame. You can spot 3 illustrations on the walls. The first one depicts the first 6 Straw Hats and was used as the cover of the very first data book, One Piece Red, Grand Characters. Luffy's outfit here with the black vest was likely the inspiration behind his look at Kaya's birthday dinner in Season 1. Below that is the color spread from Chapter 111. As we saw in the first season, many of the Straw Hats outfits were sourced from various color spreads, so I'm interested in seeing if any of these make their way in. And the final one at the bottom is, of course, the iconic Chapter 117 color spread with Dory and Brogy, which I'm sure was used as reference material for the Giant's hair and costumes. As we pan around the room, you can spot a book at the bottom of the frame. This is Color Walk 8, Wolf. The color walks are collections of volume covers and color spreads, with this one in particular mostly covering material from volume 71 through volume 81. I'm excited to see what inspiration they took from some of these color spreads that debuted later in the series. As Jeff walks through the hallway pointing out things we can't see, you can spot a few more illustrations in the back. These are a bit harder to make out, but one of them is an early drawing of Luffy in a fairly iconic pose grabbing his arm, and the other one looks to be one of Nami or Shanks. We then get more things that we're not allowed to see, but off in the corner, you'll notice a coat rack with a marine cap up top. Underneath is a garment featuring a strange but familiar logo. At first, you'd expect it to be the Baroque Works Jolly Roger, but upon closer inspection, it doesn't quite match. Now, you may think this is because it has been adapted and changed briefly for the live action, but we actually saw the Baroque Works Jolly Roger a couple times in Season 1, and it didn't quite look like this. While the Roger in Season 1 featured crossed sabers, this one looks to have crossed swords or katana. Not only that, there's several stars or dots floating above the skull, as well as some sort of hair or sideburns coming off the side of the skull's mouth. It's a bit hard to tell, but it actually looks like it could even be purple there, sort of making it reminiscent of Wapple's hair. I've wondered before if they could end up writing Wapple to get wrapped into allying with Baroque Works somehow, and maybe this is a hint toward that potential development. After all, this season likely needs to end with both Wapple being involved and the Baroque Works plot coming to a culmination, so who knows. I could also be totally wrong here, and this could just end up being a personalized version of the Baroque Works Jolly Roger for some character. We'll just have to see. We then head over to the prop department where we can see an array of weaponry, but more interestingly, this huge cart with a bulletin board at the center. From other photos taken, we can see that this reads Loguetown Tram Company up top, so it looks like this will be a means of travel through the city that our heroes may end up on. There's a ton of cool little details on the bulletin board though, so let's get right into it. Now there are 2 instances of Luffy's wanted poster up here, but it's surrounded by a bunch of advertisements, the most notable of which appears to be for what's known as Marine Victory Day, celebrating this 22nd anniversary of Roger's execution. If all of those propaganda posters we saw were not enough, it looks like the world government has made a holiday out of Roger's death, spinning it into a victory for the Marines. This is just a natural extension of what we learned to be the truth behind Roger's execution later on in the source material. This poster mentions marine merchandise for sale, fairground attractions for the whole family, East Blue cuisine, Wheel of Fortune, a strength test, thrills, spills, and puppets, a traveling fortune teller, shoot the target, and dazzling magic shows. Now, many of these can be seen as references to the Loguetown filler episodes in the anime and or the Loguetown novel. East Blue Cuisine would be a riff on the East Blue Cooking Championship that we saw Sanji participate in to win the Elephant True Bluefin. Of course, in the manga, he purchased it from Sappi, but Sappi is also involved in that contest. As for the strength test, this feels like a standard carnival game, and we actually see a sign advertising it later in this video. The traveling fortune teller would be a nod to one of the events in the Loguetown novel, where Luffy is compared to Gold Roger by a fortune teller, and of course, Shoot the Target could be setting up a brief plot for Usopp involving Daddy the Father, a marine turned bounty hunter who was in the Loguetown novel and later adapted into the anime as well. The other poster tells us that the carnival takes place in the Loguetown Execution Courtyard, which we saw in Season 1, albeit 22 years ago. It also advertises rare prizes, making me wonder what could be on the line here. The Elephant True Bluefin makes sense for the cooking festival, but there's so many more things that we could get. Also of note is the marine merchandise that was mentioned earlier, which looks to include Garp's iconic dog cap that we saw briefly adapted in Season 1. There are a few other advertisements on this board that look to be covered up by the more recent posters, a few of which stood out to me as assets that we saw back in Season 1. The man with a cart ad, as well as the firewood for sale notice, were both present on the notice board in Syrup Village. From there, we start heading deeper through the props, but one thing that caught my eye were these water jugs on the ground. This could totally be nothing, but I should note, these look to be the same ones that we saw in Season 1 during Luffy's flashback. As we continue through the prop department, some flashes are added to obscure the various weapons on display, but one prop that stands out among the rest is what looks to be a pile of training weights. This would make a lot of sense, considering that between Little Garden and Drum is one of the first times that we see Zoro training on the ship. We also see a luggage cart with a couple of suitcases. This could be used in reference to the hotel we saw later in Loguetown that was used for certain high-profile guests. Now, this frame has a ton of fun details. Of course, we have the giant syringe used by Crocus to administer Laboon's medicine. The swiveling cannon beside it is a little harder to place. It doesn't quite match the cannon we saw on the Straw Hat ship, and I'm wondering if this is meant to replace the over-the-top cannon used by Wapol. Hanging up in the back is a Doskoi Panda tote bag. Doskoi Panda is an in-universe fashion brand that we first saw on the cover illustration of Chapter 86, but it made its way into the canon pretty soon after. It appears a lot throughout the series and was even nodded to in Season 1, with one of the Arlong pirates wearing a Cyber Panda shirt, which is a knockoff of Doskoi Panda. We actually get to see a full-on Doskoi Panda shop in Loguetown later in the video, featuring a giant panda head and several hats on display. Now, in the source material, Doskoi Panda's main store is actually on Mirrorball Island, a place that was actually referenced in Season 1 when Zoro asked Kuro about the funky bar. In a similar vein, behind Jeff on this cart here is a bag that reads Robecca. This is likely in reference to Robecca Handberg, the first clothing store that we saw Nami try on tons of clothes in Loguetown. In the corner of this frame, you can make out a stack of books. The middle book here is actually the historical atlas of the East Blue that we saw in the last season during Nami's flashback. You can see it has the same spine and can even make out some of the title. The book on top looks like it could be the copy of Nolan the Liar that Nami read to Zoro during Season 1. Notice the similarity in the illustration and the cover. Of course, we have Usopp's goggles, though the bandana is not his classic brownish beige one. Instead, this looks to have been inspired by his depiction in the Chapter 140 color spread. In the background, you can spot a box of cigars, as we know Smoker goes through them 2 at a time. And even further back, you can spot Miss Valentine's blue and yellow striped umbrella. Throughout this whole scene, they're trying their best to obscure the rest of the stuff on the table, but for a brief moment, you can actually make out what looks to be a green sword's hilt. To me, this resembles the appearance of Shigure, or Autumn Rain, the sword used by Tashigi. We also see a notebook featuring art for various places. Among them are places like Kokoyashi Village and Arlong Park, but interestingly, Hand Island is also there. This is a non-canon island that was featured in the episode of Luffy in the anime, and its inclusion here is actually quite perplexing, since it was said to be in the New World half of the Grand Line. It's unclear if this is meant to just be an Easter egg, just as we saw with places like Wano and Notebooks in Season 1, or if they intend on adapting this into the live action in some form. We'll just have to see. Now, among these shelves of plates, bottles, and various miscellaneous items, you can spot an object with a marine symbol. This is Captain Morgan's sharpening machine from Season 1. and more interestingly to the left is what looks to be a globe of the world. We don't really see these too often in the series, with the most notable instance perhaps being the one on display in the Library of Ohara, so I'm hoping to see this one up close in some shots of Season 2. Then we cut to a sign that reads "No pirates, drunkards, and scallywags will be served." At first I thought this could be the Gold Rogers bar, but considering it's barring pirates from service, I would imagine it's just part of the general Victory Day celebrations. Below it, you can see an ad for the Four Oceans Underwriters. This is of course in reference to the Four Blues, and seems to be a company that insures your ship in case of any damages during your voyage. We then cut to Ippon Matsu's weapon shop. The exterior has been updated a bit to match the modern aesthetic that they're taking with Loguetown, and you can see it's being protected by marine security. On the door, you can spot a missing dog sign, as well as a sticker advertising some sort of advisor group. The shop beside it, Otino, was a shop in the source material, but ultimately is actually a reference to the real-world shop in Florence, Italy, the town which Loguetown is inspired by. The weapons shop has a sign that suggests its name to be also Ippon Matsu, named after the owner, but interestingly, it says it was established in 1320. So back in Season 1, we deduced that the current year was at the earliest 1542, based on a bottle of Ithersberger Stein that we saw in Kai's mansion. So this sign definitely lines up based on Ippon Matsu's claim that the shop has been in business for over 200 years. And to add on to that, we actually saw a bottle earlier in this video with the year 1570 on it, giving us another earliest point for the current year in the live action. Now, while there have been modernizations to the shop's interior as well, the general layout and spirit of it is the same, with these two crossed blades above the entrance, various weapons hung up on the walls, barrels of blades on the floor, and the checkout counter. We see a couple guns with flared muzzles in the cases, but down below you can spot a box reading East Blue Ammunition. There's one blade in particular that stands out with such a unique look, but I'm having difficulty placing it exactly. If anyone has any idea in the comments, I'd love to know. Then we see another shop, the Polestar Gallery, that seems to offer various decorations and artistic pieces. Polestar is of course the name of the islands on which Loguetown is located, and this was even depicted on the maps in the last season. At the bottom, there's a sign reading Golden Starfish Rating. I have to wonder if this is merely a nautical play on the concept of 5 gold stars, or a reference to Papagu, the creator of the criminal fashion brand, which we saw a reference in Season 1 as well. In the window display is an art piece depicting the bird-like Sea King that we see throughout One Piece. We actually saw it before in Season 1 on the map to the Grand Line, and given the pose that's in here, I can actually see it being inspired by its appearance in the chapter 147 color spread. Now the place to the left reads Sengoku Heights, with 711 Sengoku Street written underneath. Obviously named after the Fleet Admiral Sengoku, it would seem many of the places and streets of Loguetown are named after world government figures and or marines, as we'll see an interesting example of this in just a bit, not unlike how all the streets in Syrup Village were named after ship-related things. It's not clear what this place is, but from the looks of it, I'd guess it's an apartment complex or something to that effect, perhaps even the aforementioned hotel in Loguetown. All the way to the left, you can spot a sliver of a store that looks to be the East Blue Cafe, given the text reading fine traditional quality baked goods. This could be the same place as the deli setting that we see soon after, though this looks to be an adaptation of the outdoor meat shop that we saw when the crew first arrived to Loguetown. There's a lot of stuff similar to what we saw in Season 1, such as the meat diagrams of strange animals, but there's also some familiar products. Over here looks to be a can of Pigeon à Rosé and Belmir's Tangerine products. Now the next thing I'm about to point out personally is probably the most exciting thing I've seen in the set tour, because it's something that I've been trying to figure out for over a year at this point. Up here in the corner is a sack of something, but whatever it is, it's the same sack that we saw in episode 1 when young Luffy opens up the hatch to go meet Shanks. The text on the bag is so faded that I've been trying to make sense of it for so long now, and even when you can make out some of the text, it doesn't really mean anything, to me at least. The unfortunate news is, I still don't know what to make of the text, so if anyone's cracked the case, let me know down in the comments. We then change sets and visit Twin Capes Lighthouse. It's very old and run down, really telling us a lot about the state of things, and it's just very cool to get to see this place, as we never really saw any interiors during the Twin Cape arc, outside the inside of Lagoon of course. All around the place you'll see various nods to Crocus's namesake flower, and in the center here is what I initially assumed was something for Lagoon's medicine, but looking closer at the wiring and the specific red, yellow, green configuration, I have to think this is a means of signaling ships, since it is a lighthouse after all. Around the walls you'll notice several fish heads mounted. These both look pretty familiar, but the one I can place at the moment is the anglerfish Ankoro. He was also referenced in the last season as a mug at Arlong Park. We then get this incredible concept art of Drum Island. You can spot the Going Merry off in the corner, with the castle all the way atop the mountain. And from there, we cut back to Loguetown and see some more Victory Day decorations. Notice the poster to the left here reading Hero of the Marines. This is of course in reference to Vice Admiral Garp, who will be returning in Season 2, and this title of his will likely be expounded upon given the quote-unquote leaked page of the script that we discussed in a prior video. Now interestingly, this one building in the middle is titled Man-Mayor, which as far as we know is the name of a celestial dragon family. This is such a crazy pull as it's something that debuted in the story so recently, about 30 chapters ago at the time of this recording, and to be honest, I couldn't spoil anything relevant with the Man-Mayors if I tried. We just don't know anything about them other than that they exist, so seeing them nodded to here is really cool and exciting. Moving on to more things we don't know about, the statue at the center is also quite interesting. The plaque below it features the world government symbol of course, but the man holding up a large ring is so hard to place. The text on it reads Ning and, which doesn't have many options. Lightning comes to mind. What's even more strange is there's a small animal or object of some sort behind him by his leg. We'll need to see another angle of this to really understand what's going on with that. Now back in the props area, we see a plethora of lobsters. These could be the tomahawk spiny lobster that were first introduced in the Shokugeki no Sanji manga and later adapted in Season 1. What's interesting is some of these have augmented claws, with this one having some sort of spiked weapon, and the one in the back looking like what may be a wooden stake. It's pretty hard to tell. There's also some sort of fish-like creature in the back with a huge jaw, though it's also a bit hard to place at the moment. In the front here are various signs for East Blue dining places, but in the back, you can spot some familiar decorations. These were the tiki torch-like items that we saw across Arlong Park in Season 1. Jeff then is kind enough to tell us the release year for Season 2, but is of course censored, and they even cover the lips too, making it hard to read. But if you pay close attention to the rest of the face's movements, you can see that his jaw lowers and comes back up on the final syllable. This motion is not needed to say 6, but is needed to say 5, while the near closed front vowel sound of 6 can be produced without much lower mouth movement at all. I knew that degree in linguistics wasn't a total waste. Anyways, we get one final montage of teases as we get this little Loguetown nook. We have another barrier up top celebrating Marine Victory Day, but below it is Antique House. This was actually the clothing store that Nami ended up buying clothes from after leaving Rebecca Hamburg. Over to the left is a restaurant called Saverin's Platter. This is another reference to Shokugeki no Sanji, as Saverin was the food critic in the first chapter. It looks like we'll be getting a bunch of transponder snails used by multiple Marines in this season, given the various eye colors and shapes. Of note, the black transponder snails look to be adaptations of the ones worn on the wrist in the source material used for wiretapping. Not only that, but we are also getting baby transponder snails as well, which were initially introduced later on during the Alabasta arc. These seem to have little transmitters on their backs, sort of like the surveillance transponder snails, perhaps to make up for their inherently weaker signals. In this final montage, we get a glimpse of the Modova glove shop, which is in the manga but was also inspired by the store in Florence, which some of these images are actually from. One of the last new bits in this video is the model of the elephant True Bluefin. We saw Sanji serve this up in Season 1, so it'll be interesting seeing him with the whole fish in this season. And finally, we close off on some pretty nondescript maps at the Twin Cape. If there was too much going on here, we wouldn't have been shown it. That's about it for all the things I spotted in this set tour. If you enjoyed this video and are looking forward to more breakdowns like this in the future, be sure to like and subscribe, and do let me know in the comments what you're excited to see next. We're still a ways out from any sort of first trailer, but there's a lot more news coming our way, and you know I'll be breaking it all down. Thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I hope to see you in the next one.